When a smug tourist sprayed pepper spray into the face of a royal guard, thinking his money gave him the right to do anything, the crowd froze. But the guard stood firm, a symbol of unshakable dignity, until his colleagues emerged from around the corner. What happened next became a lifelong lesson, making the tourist regret every step that led him there. Let's start from the beginning. London's midday sun bathed Buckingham Palace in golden light, casting long shadows over the cobblestone street where a royal guard stood sentinel. He was a vision of discipline. The towering black bearskin hat, the polished red coat, every golden button gleaming like medals of honor. This wasn't just a job. He was the embodiment of British tradition, the kind of dignity that makes you think, wow, some things are still sacred. But not everyone sees it that way. Enter Darren, a colossal, shirtless mess of a man whose sunburned belly bounced with every lumbering step. Pale, sweaty, and armed with an inflated sense of entitlement, Darren clutched a tiny red pepper spray canister like it was a golden scepter. He smirked as he stomped forward, scattering smaller tourists, like a rogue elephant in flip-flops. "This guy serious?" he barked, pointing a stubby finger at the guard. His voice was loud enough to make heads turn and phones come out. "Come on, mate. You stand there all day like a mannequin? Smile or something." The royal guard didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe out of rhythm. It was a masterclass in stoicism. And oh, how that silence enraged Darren. "Oi, you deaf pal!" He pushed on, inching closer, his bare gut leading the way. "You're here for the tourists. I paid to see this place. You're part of the show, ain't you?" Let's pause here because we've all met a Darren. He's the guy who believes his money buys him the world. Rules, respect, doesn't apply to him. And when you mix that with a camera-ready ego and zero sense of shame, you get this. A quiet murmur passed through the crowd as people began to take notice. A middle-aged woman whispered, "Unbelievable! Leave the poor man alone!" Others shook their heads or muttered disapprovingly, but Darren didn't care. The guard remained as he was, stoic, motionless, eyes fixed on some invisible horizon. It was the kind of calm that screamed, "You're not worth my time," and Darren couldn't handle it. "Oi, what's this thing made of, stone?" Darren laughed, his voice sharp and mocking. He marched right up to the guard, deliberately crossing the white boundary line, the line every decent tourist knows better than to cross. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Phones were raised higher. "Look at him," Darren jeered, waving his hand inches from the guard's face. "You ain't even alive, are you?" The tension was suffocating now. Someone in the crowd hissed, "Get back, you moron!" But Darren was too far gone, too drunk on the sound of his own stupidity. And then, in the kind of move that makes your stomach drop, he raised his arm. Clutched tightly in his sweaty palm was that little red pepper spray canister. "Let's see if he flinches now," Darren roared, a sick grin spreading across his face. The crowd's gasp was instant and deafening. It was in that moment, as the canister hovered midair, Darren's fat thumb poised over the button, that everyone watching silently thought the same thing. This guy's about to cross the line in a way he'll never recover from. And if you're already feeling furious, don't worry. Karma is warming up just around the corner. Let's be honest, by now, everyone watching knew Darren was the villain of the day. The shirtless tourist with his pale, sweat-slick belly was a walking, talking representation of everything wrong with modern entitlement. His cheap bravado, his sneering grin, and that tiny red pepper spray canister in his hand, all of it screamed, "I'm the star here, and this guy in the hat? He's just part of the decor." The crowd grew uneasy. The phones were up, yes, because, let's face it, people love a train wreck. But the murmurs had turned sharp. "Is he serious?" someone hissed. "He wouldn't dare," said another, though their tone lacked conviction. And yet Darren dared. With his bloated arm raised high, he pressed down on the canister. A bright red mist shot out in a thin, mean stream. And for the first time, the guard flinched, just slightly. The spray struck his face, painting his stoic expression in shades of agony. His eyes squeezed shut, his jaw tightened, and for a split second, one fleeting human moment, the pain registered. And that's when it hit you. This isn't funny anymore, because it wasn't just pepper spray. It was humiliation. an assault on the dignity that guard represented: tradition, honor, discipline. Darren had spat on all of it with one cheap plastic canister. Darren, meanwhile, was absolutely thrilled with himself. "There we go," he bellowed, arms outstretched like he just scored a goal at Wembley Stadium. "Not so tough now, are you, big guy?" His laugh was loud and grating, a sound that made you want to hurl your phone across the room. The crowd was no longer on his side. The shift was palpable. A mother covered her child's eyes. An elderly man in a tweed cap shook his head with disgust. One woman shouted, "That's assault! Call the police!" But Darren, too thick-skinned, or too thick-skulled to notice, turned back to the crowd. "What? It's just a joke!" He grinned, raising his hands like some misunderstood hero. "Lighten up, will ya? I'm giving you a story to tell." "Oh, Darren." The crowd wasn't buying it. The jeers began. "You're disgusting! Get out of here! Have some respect!" And the phones? Oh, they were filming everything. Darren, the self-appointed star, had no idea how fast he was spiraling into viral infamy. Meanwhile, the Royal Guard, though suffering, still hadn't moved. Yes, his face was red and burning. Yes, his clenched fists trembled ever so slightly. But his body remained tall and still, a defiant monument to everything Darren couldn't understand. Discipline, honor, restraint. If you're thinking, this man is a hero, you're not alone. The crowd thought so too. And then it happened. Out of nowhere, 2 more royal guards emerged from behind the palace gates. It was as if the universe itself had decided, enough. With military precision, they closed in on Darren. For the first time, his smug smile faltered. "Oi, what's—" The guards moved fast. One hooked Darren's arm, the other swept his legs out from under him. With a sound somewhere between a grunt and a squawk, Darren's massive frame hit the cobblestones like a felled tree. The red pepper spray canister tumbled out of his hand, skittering across the stones and coming to a pitiful stop at the guard's polished black boot. The crowd erupted, in cheers. "Serves him right. Finally! Get him out of here!" Darren, now sprawled on the ground, flailed like an overturned beetle. "Oi, let go of me," he yelped, as the guards, still silent, still dignified, expertly pinned his arms behind his back. And then, like a cherry on top, the police arrived. A tall officer in navy blues stepped forward, his expression colder than January rain. "You're under arrest," the officer said, his tone crisp and final. "Assault on a royal guard is a criminal offense." Darren's protests turned to weak blubbering. "It was just a joke. I didn't mean... I was just... The officer ignored him, snapping on the handcuffs with a practiced click. The crowd cheered louder. Phones captured every second. Darren's humiliation immortalized for the world to see. A nearby teenager muttered, "Can't wait to see this on TikTok." And as Darren was dragged to his feet, red-faced and defeated, he finally looked back at the Royal Guard. The guard, still standing tall despite the searing pain, stared straight ahead, silent, unshaken, victorious. If Darren had any shred of awareness left, he might have realized the truth. You don't mess with tradition. Tradition always wins. There's something deeply satisfying about seeing someone like Darren get exactly what they deserve. It's the kind of justice you don't just watch, you feel. And as Darren's enormous sweaty frame lay sprawled on the cobblestones, wrists tightly bound in cuffs, the crowd knew one thing for certain. Karma had arrived, and it wasn't here to negotiate. Let's rewind just a moment. The Royal Guard, despite his face burning an angry red from the pepper spray, still stood tall. His jaw was clenched, his breathing steady, and though his vision was blurred and stinging, he remained dignified. Because that's what he represented. Dignity, tradition, the kind of strength no cheap tourist with a plastic canister could break. And Darren? Oh, Darren was another story entirely. As the 2 royal guards who tackled him stepped back, leaving the bloated man in a crumpled heap, Darren had the audacity to start yelling. "What the hell? You can't do that! I'm a tourist, for God's sake," he bellowed, his voice cracking with panic as the crowd's boos drowned him out. Oh, Darren, the crowd wasn't on your side anymore. Not that they ever really were. "Serves him right," a woman shouted, holding up her phone to record his downfall. "About time," muttered an older man, crossing his arms with a satisfied grunt. Phones were everywhere now, catching Darren's humiliation from every possible angle. Someone was already live streaming it, narrating with glee. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a clown, a shirtless, pepper-spraying clown being carted off to jail. Say hi to the internet, Darren." And just like that, Darren's arrogance deflated. "It was a joke. I didn't mean it," he stammered, trying to push himself upright. The police officer, whose stoic expression rivaled the guard himself, looked down at him and said flatly, "Assault on the royal guard is no joke. Now get up." As Darren was hauled to his feet, his pale face burning with embarrassment, the crowd erupted in applause. Not for the police, not for themselves, but for the royal guard, the man who had endured humiliation, pain, and a direct attack on his honor without breaking character. And here's the thing. The applause wasn't loud. It wasn't some roaring ovation. No, it was quiet and reverent, the kind of clapping you save for heroes. Because that's what he was. He didn't say a word, didn't gloat, didn't smirk. He simply adjusted his black bearskin hat, straightened his red coat, and returned to his post, as if to say, "You can humiliate me, you can disrespect me, but you'll never break me." Meanwhile, Darren, still yammering excuses, was marched off toward the police car. "This is ridiculous, I'm the victim here," he howled, his voice cracking. But no one cared. If anything, the sight of him tripping over his own feet as he was shoved into the back seat earned a few chuckles from the crowd. "Oh, Darren," someone murmured. "Bet you didn't see that coming."